All right, it's 8:30 on a Wednesday night. That means it's time for the live Panther-Lair Show here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's ACC Tournament week. Pitt's matchup for the quarterfinals is set as the Panthers will take on Wake Forest, and we've got a lot to talk about on that front tonight. So we're going to be previewing that matchup, but also we're going to have a little fun and look back at some of our preseason predictions. I'm kind of looking forward to this as I revisited what some of us on the Panther-Lair staff wrote about what we expected from this season. There's some good predictions in there, and there's some that we got pretty far off. So it'll be fun. We're actually going to be joined by a few of the other guys here. Jim will be coming in, and then we'll bring in a few other guests to talk about their preseason predictions and how they did. But you know what we always talk, or we always ask you to do right off the bat here is like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's a place we put all of our Pitt video content. We have daily morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday. Just a little bit of Pitt sports talk to get your day started. We have the live show that we're doing right here. We do it every Wednesday night, talk a little bit about Pitt sports. You can get in the chat screen there off to the right, where you can post your comments and questions. We'll respond to as many comments as we can, answer as many questions as we can. And then we have post-game shows. We will be live after the Pitt Wake Forest game tomorrow. It's tentatively a 2:30 tip-off. Hopefully it hits that number, but we'll be live somewhere around 5:30 to talk about the game afterward. Those live streams are always a lot of fun. If you want to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe right here to the YouTube channel. I think YouTube has a button somewhere down there where you can click to subscribe, and certainly you should hit that thumbs up to like the video as well. And then, the website where we have all the Pitt basketball coverage and football coverage and recruiting coverage. It's Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. It's all right there at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to interact with other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out, talking about Pitt sports. We'll have a live game thread going during the game tomorrow, where you can, assuming you're not in DC for the game, you can jump on the live game thread on the message boards and talk with other Pitt fans as the game happens. Those are always fun and lively, and sometimes deserving of more attention than we give them as moderators. But that's just part of it. I feel like it's when it's in the middle of a game, people get a little bit wild and sometimes speak their mind, for better or for worse. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's just one of the many reasons I think you should go check out Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com for all of your Pitt sports coverage. Like I said, we got a few people joining us tonight. Let's start off. Let's bring in Jim, as always. Let's see. Jim is not he's not in his lazy boy in Johnstown, I don't think. Jim, where are you right now? Tell us.
I'm on location. I'm in Washington, D.C.
In D.C. Wow. And you're still tuning into the live stream. When I told you, we're doing the live stream and stuff like that, were you like, no, man, I want to go to the game? Like, do you wish you were at this NC State-Syracuse game right now, Jim?
Not so much. I went to the afternoon game, so I got my basketball in, and I think I'm going out after we're done with this. But Chris Carter and Noah Hiles also have podcasts and radio hits right now, so we're all doing the same thing. So,
so you guys all abandoned this game? You're all skipping out on the NC State-Syracuse game, and you're not going to stick around for Boston College Clemson?
No, I mean, I was there to scout Wake Forest earlier, and that's exactly what I did.
Well, NC State is rolling right now. I don't know if you're keeping an eye on it as this is going on. They're up 13 in the second half. Less than 10 minutes to go. It looks like Jaden Taylor has picked up exactly where he left off in that game against Pitt. You surprised that NC State is, I know there's been, all the chalk won yesterday. There's been less chalk, right? Florida State won against Virginia Tech. I think Florida State was 9, right? So that was like a 9-8 upset. If NC State holds on here, it'll be another upset by the seeding at least. You surprised that NC State might be going on a little bit of a run here?
I mean, looking at it from team to team, not so much, because I think NC State has good players. But I mean, they didn't, NC State didn't look very good against Louisville yesterday, so that's the surprise. But I mean, look, about 3 weeks ago, NC State was roughly in the same spot as Pitt. Their seasons just went in two different directions. But I mean, I think the two DJs are really good, so it doesn't surprise me that NC State can get hot a little bit at least.
Well, and now Jaden Taylor is killing it. He killed Pitt. He's got 18 points tonight. for NC State. Like it's you get that extra guy. You know what I mean? You got DJ Horn, you got DJ Burns. Although I think Horn left this
He
game.
did.
I want to say he
Same.
left like early in the second half, right?
Yeah, he did, and he got a little banged up on Saturday at the Pete, so he must be going through with
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah, because he didn't play at all in the second half in that game. So I mean that certainly hurts their chances to maybe go on a real Cinderella run here. But they're taking it to Syracuse, and I mean we talk about it as an upset. It's a 7-10 game. Syracuse won 20 games this year. NC State won 18. I mean it's not, or 17 or whatever during the regular season. It's not like they were miles apart from each other. It's just a couple of games difference between these two teams. You give Boston College any chance tonight against Clemson?
Probably not, but I mean, shout out to Quentin Post. I mean, that guy's really good.
Yeah,
Like he's one of the
yeah,
best players in the conference. He actually got a vote for Player of the Year, and like, eh, I mean, he's awesome. Like, and it's surprising in this era, in this day and age. Like, he was really good last year too, and he probably could have had a lot of opportunities to go somewhere else this year. So, I mean, he stuck it out with Boston College. He's really good. I mean, I guess PJ Hall cancels them out a little bit, but like, I don't know. I mean, if Quentin Post has like 25 points and 10 rebounds, I'm not going to be surprised.
yeah, yeah. It'll be an interesting matchup. I mean, Clemson with that stupid Schiffling guy. He won. He won something, didn't he?
Most improved player.
That's it. Most improved. Yeah, which makes sense to me because he
Yeah.
was. I mean, he looked like a monster against Pitt, and it wasn't just against Pitt. He had a pretty good season overall. I'm trying to think before we bring in anybody else, or bring in some of these other guys to talk about some things. Trying to think if anything else happened since last week. I mean, Blake Hinson, obviously first team All ACC. I would have been shocked if he didn't make that. Ishmael Leggett makes sense as sixth man of the year, unless you want to make a case that he shouldn't be sixth man of the year because he's basically a starter anyway. But playing 30 minutes per game. You know what I thought was interesting, Jim, was Jeff Capel finished second in Coach of the Year voting. I thought that was interesting because like last year it was like an obvious vote. They've been terrible. They won 50 games over 4 years, 51 games, whatever it was. They were terrible for the first 4 years, and then they turn it around and have a great season. Like it made sense. It was obvious. But like this year, I felt like there was almost even more respect for it because there was like more. You had to pay a little bit closer attention to know what Pitt was replacing, know what they were bringing in, and then maybe even to know where they were after 17 games to turn it around and finish as they did. I thought it was interesting that he got the second most votes. Did that stand out to you at all?
Not really. I mean, I thought he did a really good job this year, especially with the 1-5 start. But I mean, they were picked, I want to say ninth or 10th in the
Right.
preseason poll. So I mean, to finish as a top four team, that's a pretty good accomplishment. So I didn't think he would win it 2 years in a row. Like I think Hubert Davis is deserving,
Yeah.
and they were clearly the best team all year long. But I'm not surprised he got votes. I mean, I don't know who else you really make a case for.
I mean, I think it was. I just assumed it would be. It was it ended up being one of those years. Like Coach of the Year can go one of two ways. Either you give it to the coach of the best team in the league, or you give it to the guy who's had like the biggest turnaround, right? And
Yeah.
you wouldn't say Capel's had the biggest turnaround because they won 24 games last year. So it was obvious, and I don't think there was any coach who stood out as, oh, they had such a huge turnaround. So it was obvious to go to Hubert. I guess it makes it feel like people were paying maybe closer attention to Pitt than I thought they were. To sort of look at it and say, hey, Capel did a really good job here. Like you said, I mean, going from preseason 9 to finishing fourth. And like I said, I mean, with what they lost and how they replaced them and who they look to replace it with, I guess I just didn't think that the rest of the ACC media was paying that close attention. I guess I sort of just assumed it would be like Hubert would get all the votes except for the one or two random weirdos who vote for their own team. You know what I mean?
I mean, do you think it's a carryover effect? Like Pitt being good last year put them on the map this year, where more media members are paying attention. Like I'm sure going into last year, nobody knew who Blake Hinson was or who anyone on Pitt's roster was. It's like this team finishes 14th or 15th every year. But this year, it's like people at least knew about them. I mean, like
Right.
I think they got a little bit of respect. So I don't know if last year affected this year's voting, but I think it did a little bit.
Well, it kind of like I think that almost sort of makes the point a little bit more because this wasn't a huge jump from last year. It was like a continuation, which we all asked the question, hey, can Capel carry it over? Can they, can they pick up where they left off? I just didn't know if the rest of the ACC, maybe I just sort of always assumed that the rest of the ACC only pays attention to like 6 teams and doesn't really care too much about like, what happens at any of the other schools. But I don't know. I thought that was interesting. And that stood out to me as much as anything. Like Bub Carrington making all rookie team makes sense. I think we saw just this week how good Marcus Burton is. So it made sense for him to be rookie of the year. I didn't really have any issues with that. Even like Jalen Lowe not ending up on the all rookie team. I get that. He had a really good, like half a season, it wasn't quite a full year, and his really good half a season, it was like 12 or 13 points per game, which is a lot. And he played great. And we all know that, but I don't know. Were you surprised that he didn't make that top 5 cut for all rookie team?
Not at all, but I also think if someone voted for him or if he ended up on there, I think it would be justified because I don't think over the past 2 months there probably aren't 5 freshmen better than him in this league. But I mean, throughout the course of the season, and I mean, I think that kind of hurt Bob too because someone on our board pointed out it's like he's won ACC Rookie of the Week more than anyone else. He should win. He should win Rookie of the Year, and I'm like, I don't know if it quite works that way because he had a couple like really big games like early in the season, but I think once conference play started, he won Rookie of the Week twice, and I mean Burton's been really good. I got to look at him today. He didn't have his best game. He still had like 20 some points, but they were all at the foul line. Notre Dame's like almost all their production was at the foul line today. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think anyone has like a real gripe on the Pitt team of not being like getting enough recognition.
Yeah. I think I think you're right about Burton. I think he had 21. And I think he scored 12. He was 12 of 12 from the free throw line, which actually is kind of like what Bub Carrington did against Wake Forest in the first game. He scored 17 points in the second half. 8 of those 17 were from the free throw line. He was 8 of 9 from the line, but he played really well in that game. And then the flip side, he had like one of his worst games of the season, bottom 3, I would say, in the game at Wake Forest when he went 3 of 13, scored like 9 points. It was pretty bad. But all right, we got a couple friends here tonight, Jim. We thought we could have a group conversation. Our good friends, Stephen Gertz and Matt Steinbrink from Panther-Lair.com. I'm going to bring them in for some of these conversations we're having right now because I think you, like I, respect these guys' opinions and like to hear their thoughts as well. Matt, Steve, appreciate you guys joining us. I don't know if you were could hear what we were just talking about. We were just talking about like some of the player of the year stuff and rookie of the year stuff. And so I wanted to get your thoughts. Blake Hinson, first team all ACC. I don't think anybody's got a gripe about that. Ishmael Leggett, 6th man of the year. We all agree about that. I thought it was interesting that Jeff Capel finished second in coach of the year voting. Matt, were you surprised by that? Because it's not like last year where they came out of, winning 10 games and they end up winning 24, from year to year. It's sort of like a continuation. I didn't know if you get some coach of the year votes. Were you surprised to see that?
Yeah, I was. I think it was a nice sign of respect, really. I mean, when you look at, for example, like the NFL coach of the year, they hardly ever you see it go 2 years in a row. So, it's really hard to repeat that award. And the fact that, he got votes and finished that high, I thought said a lot about Capel's season.
Yeah. Steve, what did you think when you saw that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Matt. I think it's, also where they were, picked to be in the preseason and end up getting, the double bye plus their start to the conference play. You can see, why he would certainly garner those votes. And then on the other side too, Hubert Davis, I think we all agree was, probably the number one deserving. But when you look at some of the other teams and how they performed, I don't think that they've done maybe enough standout job for any one of those other coaches to really jump out of the page either.
Yeah. I said to Jim before you guys came in, like, I feel like coach of the year tends to either go to like the coach of the best team or the coach that had the biggest turnaround. And I don't know if there was there wasn't a turnaround that was the equal of what Pitt did last year, right? Like teams more or less picked up where they left off, maybe a little better, a little worse. So it just felt like a year where the coach of the best team would get it. I just thought it was interesting to see Capel's name show up there. I want to get into our preseason predictions and what you guys think about tomorrow's game, but a question came up here in the comments, and I like this question. I want to hear what you guys think. So Byron Fleck asks, who's your favorite ACC player outside of Pitt? For me, DJ Burns. This is Byron Fleck saying it. For me, DJ Burns, he's a load with the dexterity of a ballerina. Some players need to bulk up in the offseason, but DJ needs to visit Jenny Craig. I think DJ Burns is like a blast to watch. Like I thought he was more fun to watch in the first NC State game against Pitt because he was better. I kind of thought he didn't really do much other than try to get dragged out to the 3-point line, which was pretty funny to watch. But I don't know. I mean, we can just go like Jim, Steve, and then Matt. Like who would you pick? I mean, you could pick DJ Burns if you want, but who's your favorite player to watch in this conference? Who doesn't play for Pitt?
I mean, I kind of like I appreciate maybe not so much an individual, but how Wake Forest plays. Like just seeing them up close and personal today. I know it's just kind of leaning on what I watched earlier, but like they have really great ball movement, and like Hildreth does a great job of getting to the rim. So I think they're fun to watch. But I was talking about DJ Burns earlier, and I think last night on the broadcast, I think it was Jim Boeheim. He said it's crazy to me that nobody has ever like really worked with him to get his weight down where he can play 30 minutes because he's unstoppable. And he's right. Like DJ Burns, if he gets the ball down low, he's scoring or he has great touch with his passes. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think the quote DJ Burns even said, and he was like, I grew up watching Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but I ended up like Zach Randolph. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Zach Randolph was a lot skinnier than you. So I don't know. But I mean, like, I really like his game. So yeah, I the Wake Forest team I like watching, and I like watching DJ Burns.
What about you, Steve?
I'm gonna go, Ian Schiffelin from Clemson. Love that dude. Gives Pitt a lot of fits. So, putting on a tape, you just see all the small things that he does. I mean, he's extremely efficient too. I don't know. I mean, he probably doesn't get a ton of credit, but he has like a top 25 offensive rating. His rebound rate is huge. I mean, that guy is just, I think every team would love to have that hustle, do the dirty work type of dude. And then I think he was one of their better 3-point shooters within the conference games too. So he's just really fun to watch, real high motor. And, I guess in a lot of ways do enjoy getting to see him on tape when I watching the games a few times. So
you always break down the film, Steve. I'm curious, like with him, where he gets like 74 rebounds a game or whatever he averages. I mean, is he just positioning himself well? Is it just hustle? Is he just outworking? Like what gives him that knack? I feel like he was like the most dominant rebounder we saw in games against Pitt this year.
I think his defensive rebounding rate is probably top 20 in the country. So I feel like, it has to be a combination of all of those things. There's times where he's outworking guys. I mean, he's deceptively athletic. I mean, you look at his build and you might think he's not going to be Burns, as Jim just mentioned, but that he's probably not going to be moving the way that he does. So it's definitely a combination of positioning. It's a combination of him being to read the ball, reading the ball off the rim, and then just kind of like, hey, I'm getting this rebound, right? I mean, rebounding is an effort thing. I think we all know that, and he certainly goes after pretty much all of them. So a great combination of a lot of things, and that's definitely why he's probably one of the most dominant rebounders we have in the conference.
What about you, Matt? Who do you like to watch in this league?
I would say probably Hunter Salas at Wake. Transferring from Gonzaga, obviously had a lot of confidence in himself, to make that move to Wake. And it kind of came out of nowhere to me. I didn't know much about him. And when you watch his game, I mean, he's so smooth, plays with great pace. He never forces it, scores a ton of points, but he's always under control. I think to me, looks like, pure NBA 2 guard. He's just a lot of fun to watch the way he's wired to score.
If you could pick any guard in this league to start a team with, maybe I'll take RJ Davis out of it, but if you could pick any, or you can leave him in if you want, if you could pick any guard in this league to start a team with, would you pick him? Is he your guy?
Probably. I mean, he can play the 2 and 3. He's okay. He's solid on defense, and he's definitely one of the top 3 or 4 scorers in the conference. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. He can pretty much shoot from 3. He can hurt you in the mid-range. He can drive. Just a complete guard.
Yeah, he's pretty good. All right, these are good picks. There's some fun players to watch. I wonder if we all covered a different team, if we would say Blake Hinson. I mean, like, do you think other fan bases like appreciate this guy who looks kind of out of shape a little bit, and he's but he just like is willing to shoot from any? I mean, it probably is like a dagger. If you're a Duke fan, you don't like him, but I would imagine that other fans of other teams probably appreciate. Like if there was Blake Hinson on another team, do you think you would have that appreciation for him? Anybody?
I think it's. I don't know if he's one of those type of guys that like you hate him, but you would love him if he's on your team. I mean, I think there's a little bit of that to his game, just because of a little bit, the ego really shows up in his game, and he's very demonstrative. And so I'm guessing opposing fan bases don't like him beyond just Duke. So I'm sure people can appreciate his game because like the dude just shoots logo threes and that's fun to watch. But yeah, I don't know if he kind of might be like I hate him, but if he was on our team, I like him.
It's the old like Crosby Ovechkin thing. You know what I mean? Like if Ovechkin played for the Penguins, like this town would go gaga for him. They would love him, and Crosby would be the whiny little baby who plays for the Flyers or wherever. You know what I mean? Like Sidney Crosby is exactly the guy that Penguins fans would and Pittsburghers would hate, but Ovechkin is exactly the guy they would love. All right, not to get too far down that path. I want to get into these preseason predictions here, guys, because the season's not over, but we made all our predictions before the year. It was on November 6th is when these ran, and it was pretty much predictions based on what we thought would happen in the regular season. And I thought it'd be fun to revisit these a little bit. Some of these we're not going to have much to talk about. Like the first one I'm looking at here is team MVP. We all picked Blake Hinson. Does anyone feel that Blake Hinson has not been the team MVP? Speak on it now. Exactly. I think we were all pretty confident about that one, and I think we all got it right. Now, breakout candidate, though, we had a little bit of some diverging opinions here. Matt, you and Houston both picked Will Jeffers. That didn't quite work out. What do you feel like didn't work for Will this year, Matt? Was it somebody else just emerging and kind of taking the minutes he would have gotten?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, really hard to take Blake off the floor, obviously, at the 4. And so you're looking at maybe 3-4 minutes available there. He did not fully transition to the wing, where maybe there were some more minutes, but then, it took time for Zach Austin to get into the mix. And then obviously as the season wore on, they went to the 3-guard smaller lineup. I picked him just because I thought that he had a chance to become their premier wing defender. I didn't know if the offense would come along enough to get him minutes and have him out there enough. As you can see, that is the case. I mean, he just has not developed enough on the offensive end. Now, you can hide him better at the 4, and as we saw in the couple games in the 5, defensively. But it's a real narrow bench this year. It's down to 7 players now, and there's just no consistent minutes for him.
Yeah. It's funny about him being the wing defender. In his best game this year, he was defending a center. It's the biggest impact he made. Steve, you picked Bub Carrington, and Jim and I picked Guillermo. Steve, we'll start with you. Do you feel like Bub ended up being the breakout player this year?
I mean, I guess it's tough. I think like in my write-up too, like, he obviously could have been the top newcomer as well. I mean, that clearly makes sense. So it depends on how you find like a breakout. Like to me, and I'm sure we'll get into it, one of the reasons I didn't think the team would be as successful is it's really hard to rely on freshman guards. So to me, he had to kind of break beyond just being like a new face or best of the new faces in order for the team to take a step forward, which he did. And so I still feel pretty good about him being, I guess, the breakout candidate within that, definition, and certainly is garnering a lot of attention from the professional league. So, yeah.
That's pretty good justification.
I did not think of the freshman for that category, just for breaking out. But I will say, Steven, he did kind of break out from his ranking, and, the scouting reports and everything coming out of the prep scene was solid guard, good size, could develop into a player. And I think he definitely, in that sense, broke out from a lot of the consensus.
Jim, what do you pick Guillermo? Do you feel like he ended up in that role, or who would you pick? Who would you pick now, looking back on the season?
I don't know. I mean, I think there was at times like Guillermo played well, and I think he improved from last year. And I'm probably going to pick him again next year for breakout player because I'm just really high on him. But I mean, I really liked that, he's up to 39% from 3. I mean, there's never a time this year of like, if he scores 10 points, has 4 rebounds and like 2 steals and 2 assists tomorrow, I'm not going to be surprised because I think he's capable of doing all those things. And so I still think he brings a different element to the court. And I really liked a few weeks ago when they did him and Federico on the floor together, because I think people forget like Guillermo's not a center, but he's been playing center for like 60 games now. And like everyone's like, his defense stinks, he gets eaten alive. I'm like, he shouldn't be guarding that guy, but it is what it is. So I think, next year there might be more opportunities for him to play more on the floor. And I still really like his upside.
Matt and Steve, I mean, everybody just kind of along those lines, just breaking away here for a second to tomorrow's game. Because Andrew Carr had 12 points and 11 rebounds against Notre Dame today. Efton Reed is obviously Efton Reed. What's Pitt's move here? What's the move to defend the big guys for Wake Forest in this game tomorrow?
Well, I mean, I don't think Carr has really hurt them this year. I think we saw Reed hurt them in spurts, but me personally, I'm more of a, let those centers operate inside and, attempt the twos as opposed to trying to double and exposing yourselves to open threes, especially with Wake. I think it was frustrating in the first game, to see Efton Reed just dominate inside, as did Burns in part of the NC State game. But I'll take those contested twos and, have those big guys go after it again and again, as opposed to, doubling, not getting a good rotation and giving up the open threes. So Carr had a good game today, but Notre Dame is a little thin and weak on the interior. So I don't see that happening. I think Reed will be a challenge again. But I think they just need to be patient and, and stick to their game plan, play it solid one-on-one and make sure they don't leave open threes.
Steve, who do you put on Carr? Do you put Blake on Carr or use Austin's length? What's your move defensively?
I mean, well, first of all, I agree 100% with Matt. I mean, I think doubling them is really where you're going to really get eaten up. And when you look at kind of the adjustment that Pitt just made against NC State the second time around, we didn't double Burns nearly as much. And I think they, reaped the benefit of that. Where in the first meeting, I feel like there was a lot more clips, a lot more instances where he was eating them up with double teams and passing out of that. So, I mean, Carr's had 10 points in both those games, but I don't think he's a 20-point candidate here because I'm pretty sure Pitt is just letting him going to do what he's going to do within the offense. Can't have Reed go for 25, but, I think the second meeting too, not that they needed him as much just given the way the game went, but I think you kind of pick your poison there. I think you have to put Austin on one of the guards. Because they're going to come out. You can't let Boobie Miller go off again like he did in that second game. Salas is going to probably get his to some degree. You have to limit Hildreth a little bit. So I think you have to put him on one of those guys. They're going to go to the 3-guard lineup at some point and use that to close, so it may not matter as much. I don't think you could live with Hinson on one of those guys. So I would start Hinson on Carr, probably see if you could slide Austin on one of the guards, but they probably will look to go to the 3-guard lineup sooner than later if one of those 3 guards starts taking over a little bit more than another. Because they're probably going to want Leggett on the floor over Austin.
Yeah, that was one of my sort of stark memories from the first Wake Forest game is they came out and Efton Reed was just getting whatever he wanted in the first minute or two, so they doubled him and almost instantly Hunter Salas drained a 3. And I think they had an open look from 3 also. And I think they did it for 2 possessions and they were like, all right, screw that. We can't double him anymore because we're just giving up. Wake Forest is way too good from outside that you can't take Zach Austin or one of these guys off the perimeter. So they went away from that. So I think you guys are probably right. They're not going to double. Going back to the breakout player, I think you said it, Matt. Breakout newcomer, kind of, there's some gray area there. To me, I feel like Jalen Lowe is the guy who maybe exceeded expectations as much as anyone. I mean, Matt, you mentioned the ranking. I think Bub was still ranked higher than Jalen, right? Or am I mistaken? Did I get those two mixed up? So for him to become what he has become for the last 17 games or so, I mean, he's been really, really good, but exceeded my expectations. When we get into the top newcomer here, I think I might have picked a transfer, but no, I picked Bub for the top newcomer because he was the one who was, and so did you, Matt, and so did Houston, because he was the one who was going to be the stud and all this. And Jalen ended up being, I don't know, I don't want to say that he's every bit the player that Bub is, but I mean, he's played a huge role in this team's success. So we move on to the top newcomer. Matt, Houston, and I all picked Bub. Steve, you and Jim picked Ishmael Leggett. Jim, you feel like Ishmael Leggett lived up to that top newcomer, or would you switch that to somebody else after the season?
I mean, it's hard to say between all 3 guards because they've all made such a huge impact and they're not where they are today without any of them. So, I mean, Ishmael Leggett came in with the mindset that, at least I thought he was going to be one of their top 3 scorers, and that's exactly what he was. I think the biggest surprise with him is he's their leading rebounder. So, I mean, that's very unique for a guard. But I really like Leggett's ability where he kind of seems to, whenever everything else is going crazy and the shots aren't flying, he goes to the rim and gets an easy basket. he's the one that kind of has that like Jamarius Burton, like, all right, like if you're going to take this three, Bub, you're going to take this three, and they're not going to fall. I'll just go to the rim and get a layup real quick. And like, it usually works. It usually calms them down. So I think that's a great trait to have. So, I mean, I think any of the three freshman guards you could say is, the top newcomer, and you really wouldn't be wrong.
Steve, who do you go with? Bub? That was your preseason pick. What do you say postseason? I think no, you picked.
I was also in the Leggett camp.
Leggett, right? You stick with Leggett, or do you go to one of the freshmen?
I agree with Jim here that you could probably go with any one of those, three, given how you chose to define newcomer. So, I really like Jalen. I'm very high on him. I think in our preseason, I probably mentioned that, he was the best high school tape I've seen since, being here at Panther-Lair for any of their recruits. But, I still agree with everything Jim said. That was in the power rankings this morning, that, him putting his head down and getting all the way to the basket. I think he's been a reliable defender, obviously very good on the rebounds. And he just also has a knack for hitting like shots at key junctures. I feel like on the run they went and the back half of the ACC schedule, he would just make a jumper. He would stop a run. He would ignite a run. He would do certain things like that. So, while again, I probably can make a case for all three, I'm still pretty confident in the pick with Leggett there.
All right. What about you, Matt? You picked Bub. You sticking with that postseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's obviously been extremely dynamic. I don't think you can go wrong either. One thing about Jalen, I mean, I feel like his emergence has allowed Bub to kind of emerge later in the season in kind of a completely different role. I mean, Jalen, the first couple weeks of the season, felt like he really struggled. I was worried about the transition early. He showed a lot, the tape, everything. You thought that he was going to be a good player long term. But after the first couple weeks, I did not see him turning it around that quickly. But his emergence and his ability to handle the point spot has really done wonders for himself, obviously, but also Bub.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Bub, especially I keep harping on this, like the last 5 games, like that last Wake Forest game, he shot 3 of 13. It was bad. I mean, it was a bad game. And then the next game is the Virginia Tech game where he's on the bench in the first 2 minutes because of foul trouble. Since then, like basically since the second half of that Virginia Tech game, he's been really good. That gives me as much optimism about their chances this week as anything, is that he seems to have elevated his play. Hinson has been there all along. Lowe has been there for the last 17 games. Leggett has been pretty consistent, particularly since going to the 6-man role. Getting Bub to play at that level is, I think, something that could put them over the top. Before we move on to the rest of our predictions, Wolf HD has a question that it's sort of relevant to what we're talking about here. Where do you think this team is right now if Dior Johnson was still here? Do the freshman guards develop like they have? Does Pitt avoid the early season slumps? Is Pitt better or worse off for the tournament? Matt, what do you I don't even know what I think. I think there's a lot of things that are different if Dior Johnson's still on this team, and I'm not sure if all of them are good. I'm not sure if all of them are for the better. How do you see this team? Where would they be right now if he was on the team?
It's a great question. I mean, I've thought about it a lot this year. Have discussed that. I don't know. I mean, it's a complicated topic, really, because you assume that he would have slotted in at the 1. I don't know if he was going to start there in the beginning of the season. I don't know if he would have taken on a similar path as Jalen did and, slid into that starting point guard spot at some point to let Bub slide off the ball. It's definitely exciting, and the talent level and the depth would be there. I think it obviously helps to have another guard, but there's obviously the question of how would he fit in? Would he be okay coming off the bench? Would a reduced role for the others lead to better efficiency? Would everyone be okay with their role? There's only 40 minutes at each spot at the 1 and 2. I think the rotation's working out perfectly for them now. But obviously there's a lot of talent with Dior, and he could have added another depth piece where they are thin in the backcourt. So I guess I'm saying I think it would help them and they would have been better off with him on the roster. But I think that Coach Capel and the staff would have definitely had their work cut out for them, and it probably would have been a little more challenging.
What do you think, Steve?
That's certainly a tough one. I think, you always want to have talent, and especially when you only have 3 guards, to have another one would have been extremely beneficial. I could see, if he slots in at the 1 to start the season, does Bub end up with a triple-double, which kind of like sparked his early season, prominence and the attention around the program and his confidence level. But I do think when you have a player of that caliber, do you lose the Missouri game at home? Do you win one of those Syracuse games at home, or one of the two Syracuse games? But do you also then Leggett goes down, Lowe goes into the starting lineup? If Leggett goes down, the lineup probably wouldn't have changed. It would have just been Dior and Bub the whole time. So maybe Lowe never ends up at that guy. So then you are asking yourself the same way Matt went back and forth. Does Dior progress to that same level so that Jalen didn't have to be what he is? So it's hard to say. I mean, I'd like to think that they probably do better in one of those earlier games they dropped, but I'm not sure if they finish as strong as they do or as strong as they ended up. So
yeah,
I don't know if that's an answer, but
yeah, no. I mean, I think it's complicated because a lot of it is just sort of guessing at what might have happened and guessing at how he would have fit in with his team. I mean, Jim, is Jalen Lowe the guy who gained the most with Dior's departure? I mean, it kind of feels that way. Kind of along the lines of what Steve was saying. I'm not sure if Jalen gets the opportunity that he ultimately got if Dior is still here.
Yeah, I think so as well, because I actually think Bob was going to be the starting point guard no matter what, even when Dior was still around. I started to get that sense that they kind of feel like they had something there. So, I think that if anything, it probably would have slowed down Low. But as we know, he was kind of hurt at the beginning of the year, and they probably could have used that extra guard, like Steven mentioned, when they lost to Missouri or Clemson or whoever. So, I don't know. I go back and forth with that as well. And I don't know if they would have been able to coexist, to be honest with you. I really don't. I mean, I think it's tough. I mean, you're talking about 3 4-star point guards that all with freshman eligibility, all fighting for the same spot. I don't know how it would have worked. I mean, I'm not saying like they hated each other and they would have, tried to punch each other in the locker room, but like, I don't know if it would have, I think it might have clashed a little bit.
Yeah, it's so hard to tell because Dior was around last year, right? Like he didn't play, but he was able to experience what that team was all about, who they were, how they were put together, and kind of how they meshed. And I think that went a long way in helping Blake and the Twins and Federico set a tone and will set a tone for this year's team. So Dior had to have absorbed some of that, but you just don't know. I don't know. You don't want to mess with chemistry. All right, let's move on to preseason predictions, our second part of the preseason predictions that we had this year. So the first one in this section was the toughest game. And 4 out of 5 of us picked the Duke game. Jim picked the West Virginia game. It's pretty remarkable, guys. We all picked games that Pitt ended up winning. when we talked about the toughest game, nobody picked at Wake Forest on February 20th or whatever it ended up being as the toughest game. The Duke game is the most surprising win of the season. I think we would probably all agree about that. Is there a second most surprising? Is there a second one that you point out? I mean, I guess the Virginia game. Darn it, that's an easy, obvious one too. Okay, what's the third most surprising win, Jim? Is it I guess West Virginia, since you picked that as the toughest game?
See, like that was one of those, like, how I already said, like I'm going to pick Guillermo as my breakout. Like I've been doing West Virginia for years because like Pitt was getting killed by West Virginia annually. And like at some point they needed to win a backyard brawl. So that was kind of, I knew West Virginia wasn't that good. So there was some logic behind it. But I mean, as far as surprising outcomes go, I kind of go back to the Virginia Tech game a few weeks ago. Not so much because Virginia Tech's good, but because like they normally don't play well against them. And they handed Pitt a pretty tough loss last year. And Virginia Tech, like they're kind of like Wake Forest, where they spread you out, they move the ball really well, and they have shooters. So for them to just kind of like sit on them in the second half and win by 15, I was pretty impressed by that.
What about you, Steve? Is there one that stands out after Duke and Virginia, or is there one that even stands out more than Duke and Virginia as a sort of a surprising win in a tough game?
I mean, I think since we're looking back, I mean, and even though I picked them to win that game, I think the last game of the season, like against NC State, you'd already beaten them. It's hard to beat teams twice. Keats has a good record against Pitt and at the Pete. So in a game that meant more to us than it did to them, or more to Pitt than it did to them. So I just feel like looking at the wins, I would say that was a pretty tough game.
Matt, is there a surprising win for you aside from the two obvious?
Yeah, after those two, I think sweeping NC State, especially winning down there, kind of get the monkey off the back. I mean, Clemson and NC State have been the two nightmare matchups for the program. So that win early at NC State, it was a tight game to come through like that. And then Steven mentioned to get them again at home. I mean, it's not the best group that Keats has had, but it's a really solid team with a lot of talent.
All right, next one we had here was this is one of the better ones. Our bold prediction. We each made a bold prediction this year. Steve, yours is listed here first, so we will go with that first. Your bold prediction was that Federico would win the Defensive Player of the Year. I don't think he finished in the top 5 of the voting. I believe I was going to look it up real quick just to double check that, but I'm pretty sure he didn't finish in the top. But to your credit, like Jeff Capel agrees with you. Jeff Capel said before the season he felt like Federico was the best defensive player he felt like he was the best defensive player in the conference last year. So you're not the only one who felt that way. Obviously, it didn't exactly work out that way. What do you feel like was different for Federico this year defensively? Did teams attack him differently? Did he do things differently? What do you feel kept him from being the Defensive Player of the Year, as you so boldly predicted?
Well, I'm glad the coach of the team felt that Federico was going to be the defensive player of the team. I think that always bodes well. And, I guess even though I'm listed first, knowing the other ones that you guys picked, mine was by far the most bold and incorrect. So, I mean, I think what went wrong is, his confidence a lot of times. There were just times that he didn't look like he was the same type of player. The post defense wasn't there. I mean, when you look at, how he played Baycott last year and really gave him fits, I just don't know if you saw the same level of confidence in his play in his post play. He was still giving you weak side shot blocks like he's always going to give you. He could still block man on man. I thought his ball screen defense was still very good this year. That definitely doesn't win you Defensive Player of the Year. But I think the main thing was he wasn't able to really maintain the momentum. Like I feel like his drop off right around the end of non-conference, I think you guys probably remember as well, like just for no reason seemingly. And then we never found out about an injury. And then the other thing is his rebounding never really took off to like add another 1.5 or 2 rebounds a game the way that, probably you need to be to win the Player of the Year as well. So to be honest with you, I can't really explain it, but when you throw on one game to the next and he just doesn't look like the same guy, I guess that would probably be why it didn't work out.
Now, he was much better against DJ Burns the second time than he was the first time. I think we'd agree about that, right? So, and I'm just like glancing over the box score from the 2 Wake Forest games. I don't remember Efton Reed being a huge factor in that second game. He was 5 of 6 from the floor. He had 12 points and 5 rebounds. He only played 17 minutes. He had 4 fouls. Do you recall him, Federico, playing Reed better in the second game than he did in the first? And is there any reason that you would be confident about Federico going into tomorrow's game when he has to face Efton Reed again?
Well, I think he's been playing well of late. I mean, again, you mentioned he played Burns pretty well. I think, when you look at kind of how that game got out of hand, it's hard to see like the full picture of what that game would have been and what Reed would have been like if they would have like needed to dump the ball down him like late down the stretch in any type of meaningful situation, the way they did, when Pitt defeated them. They went to Reed the whole time, right? And that was a close game. Not the same way in the second half or in the second meeting. Yeah, I mean, I think they'll start that way. I think he did do an effective job early. I think Wake tried to establish other players earlier as well, and Boobie Miller went off a little bit. Salas had another good game. Hildreth had a much better game when he was in their building. So I don't think they had to rely on Reed in the same way. But I don't think Reed is gonna he's not a 25-12 guy, so I don't expect to see that regardless tomorrow.
Right. All right, Matt, your bold prediction. This was a good one. Pitt finishes in the top 5 of the ACC. Shout out to you, Matt. Got that one right. That was pretty good. And as I'm reading through it here, I'll read you what you wrote. Quote, the non-conference schedule is tough, but not over the top. I think that was putting it mildly. It says that should prepare them for conference play, and I think the youth can help them peak later in the season. Good on you. And at the risk of not being bold enough, I will also say that Bub Carrington makes the all-ACC freshman team and just loses out on freshman of the year to a blue blood choice. So not necessarily to a blue blood choice, but that's pretty good, Matt. That's pretty good. But you had a line in there about you're not sure if this year's team will be better than last year's team. So I'll push you on that one. Is this year's team better than last year's team?
I think the ceiling's higher. Last year's team just had some more experience. So I think the floor was higher. I think the range of outcomes game to game was more there. This team just has, higher variance, from the very beginning, just because you have a freshman backcourt. So to answer your question, I don't know if they're better, but I do think there's a chance that, if they're peaking at the right time, the freshmen keep playing like this, Blake Hinson is, to me, taking it to another level, and I think he's even more dangerous this year. And all of these guys seem to be slotted into their roles, and they're gelling. So I think this team probably has a higher ceiling. I think that, the senior guards last year were great for Pitt, but this younger group just has more potential to me.
All right, so this is corny, but if you had that last year's team playing against this year's team, understanding it'd be Blake versus Blake, Fetty versus Fetty, and so on, what's the matchup that decides the game? Like, where do you think one side has a big advantage over the other, or is there one?
I'm confused now, Chris. I think the way the freshman guards are playing right now, and if you throw Ishmael in there as the small 3-guard lineup, I think, to me, when that lineup's on the floor, I like this team probably a little bit better, especially in like a 1-game setting. Maybe that team last year was better built for the grind of the ACC season, but if you're in a 1-game setting, I think you're taking this team.
I feel like
close.
You guys can tell me if you disagree. I feel like Bub and Jalen are faster than Jamarius and Nelly, right? Like, there's just a speed advantage there. And I feel like that would be a separate. I mean, like, Jamarius and Nelly were smart and experienced, and they could play really well, but like those dudes are fast. Like, that's the thing that stands out to me about Jalen. When he gets that, he doesn't need a big opening, but you just give him an inch and he is gone to the hoop. And I'm not really sure. I don't know who guards him. Like, I don't think Nelly could really cut him off, right? I mean, Steve, you've broken down film of all of last year and all of this year. I mean, could Nelly guard Jalen if that's or would you have to put Jamarius on Jalen?
I mean, I would probably take my chances switching him. I mean, Burton was a much better point of attack defender. I mean, a product of his size, a little bit more length. But I mean, for Jalen, I mean, the only way I feel teams are effective against containing his dribble penetration is off ball screens. Is one, you just it's got to be his defender that fights back over so that the other defender doesn't have to drop at like a insanely fast rate, right? He can kind of recover more, and then also containing him has got to be responsibility of like the weak side slot defender to kind of help at the nail, right? And you just see so many situations where it's hard to weak Jalen. It's hard to like force him back into that weak side slot defender. So when he's driving to his left, if the other player, if it's Hinson in the corner or somebody else, there's nobody there. And you're not going to help out a Hinson out of the strong side corner. So the fact that you have to scheme to slow Jalen down a little bit more than you would maybe Bob, just kind of almost just because Bob loves to stretch those ball screens out as much. He's not always looking to get downhill, but to his credit has done that a lot more in the last, maybe 8 to 10 games. I mean, I don't think either of those guys really are going to stay in front of him a ton. I think it has to be a team concept thing, which certainly speaks to how good Jalen is getting downhill.
And then you're going to need Greg Elliott to defend Ishmael Leggett. Like, Elliott might foul out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably not, I mean, Elliott, I mean, you guys know was consistently on my not most attentive defender list last year. So, I mean, him against Ish is not a great matchup.
No, that wouldn't go well. That wouldn't go well. All right, Jim, you're the next bold prediction here. This one remains to be seen. A couple of these do, but your prediction was Bub Carrington's a one and done player. So around the horn, you still think that's happening, Jim? You still predict that?
If I had to say, if the NBA draft was like tomorrow and he could announce tomorrow, I think he would go. That's just kind of my personal feeling of the situation right now. But like in the preseason, like he started to get a little bit more buzz, and like kind of just around the program, people kind of started to realize, okay, this guy's pretty good. He's better than the 94th best player. He's going to be the starting point guard. So whenever I made that projection, it was kind of, there was some research behind it. It wasn't like a blind dart. Like I kind of had a feeling like Pitt had something there. So it ended up being true that he ended up being one of the best freshmen. I don't know if he's going to leave. I mean, my gut right now is saying yes, but we'll see.
Matt and Steve, gun to your head right now, like just yes or no. Is Bub Carrington on the team next year?
I'll say no. I think it'll just come down to the feedback they get and whether or not he can get in that first round. I mean, I think we saw some concerns there in the middle part of the season, and then he kind of bounced back. But what a lot of people aren't looking at is, the shooting percentages, the points, all the production. That's one thing, but his age is going to help him and his size. I know that, the scouts have been around, and when you see him on the floor, the kid just looks different. And I think he's shown that there's some versatility. He might be just long enough to actually play on or off the ball at the next level too. But I think his age is going to help him. But they'll do their homework. I don't think they're going to make. We've seen some bad decisions, both football and basketball here, both programs. I don't think we'll see that. I mean, I think whatever decision he does make will be the right one.
What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Jim and Matt. I mean, and I definitely think, the age thing's a big factor. And I think there was a forum post that I responded in, and we chatted a little bit in there the other day. But I mean, his age is a huge thing. I mean, he's going to play the entire NBA season at 19 years old next year if he goes. I mean, that's like, he'll be one of the youngest players. I mean, that's like a Scoot Henderson territory. I mean, not in terms of ability or talent, but in terms of just like age and development. It's not considered to be a really deep draft, or at least in terms of like loaded stars at the very top. And I also think when you look at the teams that are picking towards even the end of the first round, would love to have a guy that could develop in there. And when you look at the contracts that those teams have expiring, what they like to do, I mean, Denver's going to be picking at the end of the first round, right? And they run a ton of like high ball screens and pinch post entries on, Nikola Jokic. Not that he would play with Jokic, but they do that really well with a 6'5", 6'6" guard that's kind of a combo guy in Jamal Murray. So, I mean, there's teams there that I think can groom him. I think if he gets a first-round promise, I think he goes.
Well, we'll see. All right, another one that we haven't found out about yet. We'll find out sooner than we find out about the one-and-done thing. Houston's prediction. Pitt makes the NCAA tournament. I'm sure we all have our own ideas, but we'll go around the horn here. Jim, if they win tomorrow, are they in? But last week, you and I, and I've mentioned this a few times, last week, I think you and I came to an agreement that if they beat NC State on Saturday, and if they won a game on Thursday, whether it was their first game or their second game, if they won on Thursday, they would be in. That was our conclusion last week. We know who they're playing, net and quad and all of that stuff. If they win tomorrow, are they in? Yes or no?
My answer is yes. I know that I know the bracketologists might not agree with me right now, but I think what that does is it takes Wake Forest out. And the way I'm looking at it is they're not going to take 3 ACC teams. They're going to take 4 or 5. So I think this game tomorrow pretty much determines who that 4th team is going to be.
So this is a win and you're in?
I think it's a win and you're in. I think, tomorrow's a playing game in my eyes.
Steve, you see it the same way?
I mean, I certainly would lean on where you guys sit in terms of, the entire landscape for, them making it and the quad ones and whatnot. But I think that does represent a quad win tomorrow, right? Should they win, that would be quad 1. I agree with Jim. It knocks out another Wake team. And so long as there's not a lot of upsets in the conference tournaments, right, where those at-large bids come down because of upsets, I think they position themselves. And I would agree. I don't think that at the end of the day, they're only going to have 3 ACC teams in. So if they win tomorrow.
What do you think, Matt?
I agree. I think they're in. I think, Wake winning today and beating Notre Dame helps them because I think if Notre Dame would have upset Wake and they beat Notre Dame tomorrow, I don't know if that does anything in their eyes. Then it would, it's an additional win, but then you got to play North Carolina. You probably have to win that. So I think Wake was who you wanted to see get through. And I think, like you guys said, win and they should be in.
Well, and I think to Jim's point, too, any loss by Wake Forest would knock them off the bubble. You know what I mean? Because you're looking at building Pitt's resume, but you're also looking to try and drop out some of those other teams that are competing with for bubble spots. And so even I don't know how close Syracuse was viewed as being to the bubble, but they're gone now. You know what I mean? Like whatever hope they might have had is eliminated by losing to Florida State. So I mean, and I think they were behind Pitt as it is, but I mean, any bubble team that takes a loss like that is a good thing for Pitt. Now you just need Pitt to be the one that hands them the loss. And then we'll go to my bold prediction is that the Diaz-Graham twins will combine to make 45 plus 3-pointers. Now I get an asterisk on that because Jorge only played, I had the box score in front of me. How many, Jorge only played 16 games. All right. Now, in the 16 games that he played and what Guillermo played, they had 37 combined. So that's pretty good. If Jorge had played the other 15 games, do you guys believe Jorge would have made 8 or more free 3-pointers in another 15 games?
I think there was a chance for that because
a chance?
Well,
Of course he would have made 8. What do you mean a chance?
well, he stopped. Well, like before he was announced as injured, we all just thought he wasn't getting any playing time. But I think he was injured all along. So, assuming he wasn't like benched in those games and like he actually was hurt, then yeah, he would have made 8 more.
Right. I mean, he had 9 in 16 games, and like you said, he was dealing with an injury. I mean, I think he would have absolutely made 8 more. I feel like, but I also think there's a chance I could still get there on my prediction. Guillermo's got at least 1 game, right? I mean, he's not going to make 8 tomorrow, but if they win tomorrow, they play 2 games in the ACC tournament. If they get in the NCAA tournament, he could make 8 in 3 games or 4 games, right? That's not out of the realm of possibility, is it? Is that crazy?
No,
It's a good prediction, Chris.
Thank you. I'm going to take my victory lap on the next one. Matt, you and I are both going to take victory laps on the next one. But the only other thing I point out, when I made that prediction, I in my write-up, I mentioned that Mo Gee made 43 3-pointers for Pitt. And I know we all like enjoyed the Mo Gee threes, but I had forgotten that he actually made 43 of them. Sort of ridiculous 2 years ago. Mo 3, right?
Mo 3. Yeah.
All right. Season prediction. We predicted the records, and I'm skipping over. First of all, no, I'm not going to skip over anything. Steve, 16 and 15. Man, you were down on this team, Steve.
Okay, there's a point in the season, right, where that looks like that's like I'm the one that's trending in the best direction. So,
Yes,
there's a time. And I think in the write-up, I went back and I looked at all of ours, and you guys, I think for the two of you, Matt and Chris, that actually nailed it at 21 and 10 is ridiculous. But I just didn't believe in the freshman guards. Not belief in that they weren't going to be, contribute or anything like that. But I mean, when you rely on what could have been an all-freshman point guard or an all-freshman guard backcourt, I mean, that's tough. And the ACC is not an easy league, and there was a lot of teams that had a lot of experienced backcourts. I mean, you look at, Virginia Tech as a team that's kind of, more in the middle of the road, but with Padula and Couture, it's hard to send 2 freshmen up against that. And so that's pretty much what I predicate around. But I did say things like, if they play better, then I could see them winning 9. Now, 9 is still shy of the 12, but I did say things like that. I think I did correctly call out the games in the non-conference that they would win and lose or split between 2 and 2 against those like Florida, West Virginia games. So look, I'm defending that I had clearly the worst prediction here in this category. So anything I could do to save some faith, but yeah, I mean, not much to say here, guys. I was way off.
I do like that you were like, they might be able to get to 9. They might be able to win 9
Here they get
conference
12,
games.
so yeah.
Yeah. Well, Houston was next. He was 19 and 12. He didn't even give us a write-up to justify his prediction there. Jim, you went 20 and 11, so you weren't too far off. But the real champions here, Matt, you and I, 21 and 10. Listen to this brilliance, guys. All right. The way I look at it, quote, Pitt should be able to go 9 and 2 in the non-conference. Nailed it. By beating the mid-majors, winning 1 game in Brooklyn, nailed it, and splitting the Missouri and West Virginia games. I mean, I should have bet on that. I said, but then when you get to ACC play, I don't see any reason this team would do worse than 500. I mean, how good is that, Matt? I think like winning 1 in Brooklyn and splitting Mizzou and West Virginia. Steve, you said the same thing. I don't think there was anything too shocking about that. But Matt, you and I, kudos. Great job predicting the exact record of 21 and 10. We were very good at that. All right, guys, we're almost out of time here. Tomorrow, let's real quick just go around. We'll go Jim, Steve, Matt. Jim, what happens tomorrow? What's the key tomorrow? Not to give away your staff pick prediction already, but what happens tomorrow in Pitt Wake Forest?
My key stat or something to watch for is Wake Forest has 20 wins this season. 16 of those have come at home. So that this team is 4 and 11 in road and neutral games. So, Pitt saw the fury of Wake Forest, in Winston-Salem, but so did everyone else. So I'm interested to see that aspect of it because, Pitt's been pretty good away from the Pete. So I think that's going to be a big factor.
For sure. Steve, what do you think?
I'm going to go with, I think which set of 3 guards are going to be a little bit better. And I just happen to think tomorrow that's going to be Pitt. And I think that this is an absolutely game in a neutral site where Blake Hinson gets up for it. I think he's going to be the best player on the floor. And so, that's kind of the way I'm leaning. If only one of those things is true, though, could be close.
Matt, you got a thought on tomorrow?
Yeah, I think Blake is really locked in. I think he has a chance to to be special tomorrow and go on a little run. One thing that does concern me is, the double bye is great. You get a rest, you get off until Thursday, but there is sometimes an advantage to getting a game under you, seeing the environment, the shooting backgrounds, being in that atmosphere. So, we've seen some of those teams that have sat, 2 days, and it can be tough unless the team's fatigued and they're coming from Tuesday. So something to look out for, but it should be a good game.
I feel like you talk about getting the shooting background. I feel like the rims are bigger in this arena or something. Like the scores of these games are ridiculous. I don't know if you guys are betting the overs. Like, the NC State Louisville game was 94-85. Notre Dame Georgia Tech game was 84-80. Boston College scored 81. Which one was it? Oh, the Wake Forest Notre Dame game was low scoring. That was only 72-59. But Florida State Virginia Tech 86-76. NC State scored 83. Everybody's just scoring a ton of points, it seems like, in the ACC tournament so far. So maybe this is going to be and if there were two teams that could put up like a ton of points, it might be Pitt and Wake Forest when they're facing each other. So this might be another high scoring game if Pitt, kind of think, to your point, Matt, hits the ground running. That game at the Peterson Event Center, they didn't. They were down 10 at halftime. I don't think they really want to be in that position again, but they can get hot. We've seen them get hot. We've seen them make a lot of shots. But Jim, Matt, Steve, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you hanging out tonight. It was a lot of fun revisiting our preseason predictions and then talking about this team and the ACC and everything like that. So thank you very much. Thanks for all your content and everything, of course, on the site at Panther-Lair.com. And enjoy the game tomorrow. Jim, you have fun down there in D.C. And everybody who tuned in tonight, thanks so much for tuning in as well. We appreciate it. Don't forget, we'll have the live post-game show after the game tomorrow. That'll be around 5 or 5:30 right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and you won't miss any of it. And then get all our pregame and postgame coverage at Panther-Lair.com tomorrow. Panther-Lair.com. You can read all the stuff from Matt, read all the stuff from Steve, read all the stuff from Jim, and I'll just be there pushing publish because they all do a great job with it, and I'll leave it to them. So thanks for tuning in tonight, guys. Thanks for hanging out. We appreciate you. And everybody have a great night. We'll talk to you tomorrow.